David Harper, 50 years old, had devoted about 18 years to Summit Solutions, a tech company in Cleveland, Ohio. My footsteps left traces on every system, from the days of dial-up connections through the chaotic phases of cloud migration. I was the one who weathered every upheaval, trained countless junior engineers, and debugged every faulty file late into the night. Back then, I always told myself that loyalty was the greatest strength, even when no one remembered you. My heart beat to the rhythm of the keyboard. Every line of code felt like catching a breath of life. That morning, the conference room air turned suddenly frigid. Ethan Reed, the newly arrived MBA grad with a detached gaze, sat across from me, alongside Laura Mitchell from Human Resources. The door clicked shut softly, and before I could grasp what was coming, he said, "Jake, after 17 years, we have to eliminate your position. Please clear your desk before you leave." My heart skipped a beat. A flood of memories surged. Those early, uncertain days, the tireless hours spent fixing bugs, and the simple moments when my daughter Emily would tug at my sleeve each morning as I took her to school. I nodded quietly, my eyes as still as a frozen lake. No words of grievance, no pleas for mercy. Had I, by dedicating my entire life to one place, forgotten what anger or resistance felt like? As I walked back to my desk, I heard the soft click of shoes on the floor and saw the sorrowful, hesitant glances of colleagues, young coders I had once mentored. Now I realized they didn't grasp half the secrets that lay buried beneath the system, secrets I'd spent over a decade cultivating. Returning to my familiar desk, I took in each drawer: family photos, coffee mugs handcrafted by my son Jason back when he was in high school, and even that little cactus that had survived under harsh fluorescent lights for 7 seasons. Each item felt like a fragment of my soul embedded in that space. Chloe Sanders from marketing suddenly appeared, her eyes reflecting the whispers of onlookers. "Jake, I just heard. It's so unfair. You've built this company for years." I offered a half smile. Companies can pivot at any moment, but no one can predict their decisions. As I walked out, Daniel waited in the hallway, his eyes never wavering but silently scrutinizing each step. No handshake, no farewell, just a watched departure I had grown accustomed to. Touching their system, which he didn't truly understand, I realized I was losing more than a job. I was losing what had formed my identity for a large part of my life. My heart felt shattered, though my outward composure remained intact, because I'd resolved not to let this play destroy me. Sitting in my old car parked in front of the 7-story building I once called home, I stared at my reflection in the windshield, tears brimming. Little did they know that the one they discarded was the keystone. I started the engine and drove home to face Sarah Harper, my wife, who had always treated my servers and mainframes like a third family member. Our daughter, Emily, who was once the little girl clutching my hand each morning, was now about to complete her master's degree. I remembered the day she held her diploma, her eyes shining with pride. Now I wondered, after all these sacrifices, would anyone ever truly recognize my worth? The drive home was filled with contemplations. I couldn't forget the sleepless nights spent vigilantly monitoring lines of code, wondering if the system would remain secure come morning. More than 2 years ago, during a legal crisis, I took it upon myself to establish a security audit protocol, burying all admin accounts behind 3 layers of authentication. I documented every detail in case of a data leak and captured every change, however small. That caution had cost me countless sleepless nights and countless fragmented memories with my family. At noon, I entered the house in silence. Sarah met me with a hesitant hug, knowing I'd just been dealt a blow. "Jake, are you okay?" she asked, her voice echoing through our sunlit kitchen. I shook my head slightly and looked out the window at the backyard garden, where so many happy family moments had unfolded. "They don't understand your value," she said, but I knew no consolation could erase this sense of betrayal. All afternoon I sat at my home PC, reviewing every critical backup, the code files, the system schematics, even the hidden vulnerabilities only I knew. Everything was safely stored off their servers. I recalled the first time I met Daniel. He He didn't know the concept of backups back then and forced me to give a cloud integration presentation full of buzzwords. While they were enamored with digital transformation, I quietly warned of the risks of data loss. Those warnings were like a breeze against a storm, insufficient to prevent the layoff tempest. When night fell, I sat at the dining table surrounded by my certificates and Summit Solutions medals displayed on the wall, testaments to tireless devotion. My daughter video called, "Dad, how are you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and replied, "Everything will be okay, Emily. Dad just needs some time." The warm lamplight cast shadows across our four faces, engulfed in a chaotic moment between disappointment and a burning desire for justice. I realized then that silence isn't always golden. The next morning, I went to a labor attorney's office. My employment contract explicitly stated confidentiality rights and required a 60-day notice period for termination, yet they had given me only 2 hours to pack up. Those procedural violations became leverage for me to gain the upper hand. My sense of failure morphed into determination. I imagined Daniel's stunned face when he opened the immediate legal action filing, crafted with meticulous precision by my own hand. A flame ignited deep inside me. I remembered every sleepless night spent coding and every extra hour worked over Thanksgiving just to ensure the servers stayed running. Now, I possessed evidence of every audit protocol and a detailed event log documenting who accessed what and where the backup copies resided. Such proof can't be bought. It's forged by over 2 decades of experience. With that, I stood on equal footing, no longer a pawn to be discarded. A few weeks later, a famous tech news site published an exposé. Summit Solutions scandal, retaliatory layoffs, and backup secrets exposed. The sensational headline asserted that the company had grossly violated its security commitments and basic employee rights. And there was Ethan Reed, the flashy face of tech innovation, suddenly overshadowed as stories of dedicated employees like me surfaced. Outrage from clients and shareholders forced them to sit down and negotiate. During the settlement talks, my attorney demanded fair compensation and assurances that my reputation wouldn't be tarnished in the media. They had no choice but to agree, because everyone knew I held the master key to every corner of the company's technological infrastructure. It felt both sweet and bitter to see Summit Solutions bow before someone once hailed as a model of loyalty. Finally, I stood in front of the old building, familiar yet transformed. I held the agreement in my hand, the pen marks bearing my resolve. Sarah, Harper, and Emily stood beside me, their eyes brimming with pride. I realized I had not only won back justice, but also found strength in the very pressures that once overwhelmed me. Not to enact bloody revenge, but to affirm that the truly dedicated are never forgotten. Summit Solutions gradually stabilized again, but my presence remained etched in every security milestone the company achieved. I began a new chapter, redefining loyalty and freedom. Perhaps after all, the most important thing wasn't the title of Senior Systems Analyst, but the value I brought, something no one could take away unless I let them. And in the dawn light over Cleveland, Ohio, I knew the road ahead would be freer and more powerful than ever. Jake looked at his reflection in the beer glass, his heart heavy, forcing a wry smile. "Everything okay?" Sarah Harper asked softly, her eyes full of concern. I nodded and took a sip of the warm beer. Just some changes at the company, nothing new. But in reality, those changes were pushing me into the shadows. Since Ethan Reed took over as head of IT, I felt myself increasingly sidelined. In meetings, my colleagues' eyes flickered over me as I walked in. Emails about system upgrade projects no longer landed in my inbox. Younger team members were assigned tasks I used to handle. One afternoon, I stumbled upon an internal memo regarding Summit Solutions' modernization strategy, and my name was nowhere to be found. The organizational chart for the IT department had been completely redrawn. Under the new leadership of Tyler Brooks, a suit-and-tie consultant boasting a Stanford degree all over LinkedIn, my position as Senior Systems Analyst no longer existed. A sense of alienation washed over me, as if no one remembered that I had built these very infrastructures, layer by layer. As I struggled to endure, one morning while running the routine security scan, a task that no one had bothered with in ages, I discovered suspicious data streams in the financial management software. A series of mysterious transfers had gone to a company called Apex Solutions Group. In an instant, I opened a browser and typed Apex Solutions Group, Ohio. The results showed that this company had been registered only 1 year ago, and its address was just a small UPS store in a Cleveland suburb. The initial payments were only a few $1,000s, but the next month they doubled, then tripled. Everything lined up. The transfer dates matched the software license renewal period that the whole company used. But the costs were inflated by as much as 15 to 20% over the actual price. I furrowed my brow, my meticulous nature halting me. I didn't rush to tell anyone. I simply saved every invoice and every transaction. People often think that a silent man knows nothing. In truth, I observe closely. And on the morning they ran out of ways to push me out of Summit Solutions, I sat at my desk under dim lighting, staring at my personal laptop. No alarm bell rang, only the enveloping silence and that empty feeling. Sarah Harper brought me a steaming cup of coffee without uttering a single word. We had been bound together for more than 18 years. She understood when I needed my own space. "Are you going to the store?" Sarah Harper asked as she sat down on the old wooden chair by the door. I shook my head lightly. "No, I just need a moment." She nodded and left, leaving me with my chaotic thoughts. After she left, I pulled the USB drive from the bottom drawer of my desk and slowly plugged it into my laptop. Years ago, when the legal team had demanded an audit system to detect insider threats, I insisted on having off-site backups. They agreed and then forgot. All the documents, internal emails, technical meeting minutes, and even financial transaction logs, I had stored them all here. The figures on the screen stood out clearly. About $2 million had been transferred to Apex Solutions Group over the past 18 months. Scanning through each line of the report, I saw that the final approver was Anthony Clark, the Chief Financial Officer of Summit Solutions. A chill ran down my spine. I worked quickly, matching the dates to the software renewal invoices for the entire company. The amount had been inflated just enough to avoid financial regulators' notice, yet still profitable for them. I looked up the business registration for Apex Solutions Group. The owner was listed as Gregory Clark. In moments, I found Gregory on Facebook, a family photo with Anthony, complete with intimate comments. They were brothers-in-law. I sat still, my heart as cold as ice, feeling my outrage dissolve and give way to a calm determination. They thought I was just an old IT guy who knew nothing about finance. In truth, I knew exactly what to do. Most employees believed I was just packing up, unaware that I had kept a copy of every internal file. A message from Justin Zabpol, the young analyst I had once mentored, popped up. "I'm sure you heard yesterday. It's so unfair. Brooks has all the power now, and he's moving into your old office." I set my phone down without replying, my heart racing. The final piece clicked into place. Daniel and Anthony Clark had pushed me out to keep their collusion hidden. I opened my email and drafted an outline for a letter to the board of directors. But just as my finger hovered over the send button, I hesitated. Too direct, likely dismissed as the rant of an unemployed man. I deleted the draft, wondering how to bring the evidence to light in a way that couldn't be silenced. The plan began to take shape in my mind. I needed an irrefutable counterstrike. The slant of dawn light filtering through the window brought me back to the present. I thought of the sleepless nights when I'd meticulously handled each line of code to keep the servers up. Only I knew that every single byte of data had value. Now, that value could become a weapon. I decided not to file a lawsuit immediately, but to set up my chessboard meticulously. The image of my family filled my mind. Emily's radiant smile as she received her diploma. Sarah Harper's proud look when we all celebrated together. They were the reason I couldn't give up. I realized that justice wasn't just an abstract concept. It had to be proven through action. But that action needed to be airtight so no one could deny their guilt. Over the next few days, I continually reviewed the document copies, sorting the evidence into a clear timeline, from the smaller invoices to the larger ones with obvious markups. I took screenshots of each document and uploaded them to an encrypted server, ensuring they couldn't be erased. My plan for retaliation began with making sure the right people would face justice. Finally, I chose to reach out to a reputable investigative journalist who had covered major financial scandals in Ohio. In a concise email backed by all the evidence, I attached copies of every invoice, the marked-up spreadsheets, and proof of communication between Anthony and Gregory Clark. I explained that, without timely intervention, the losses would only grow. Just a few days later, the news spread like wildfire. Financial news tickers and major news websites all ran headlines: Summit Solutions, internal financial management scandal, CFO Anthony Clark caught in a series of price gouging errors, and senior team's fraudulent activities exposed. Shareholders and clients piled on pressure, forcing the board of directors to act immediately. At the special board meeting, Ethan Reed and Anthony Clark were called upon to explain themselves. When I entered the newly tiled conference room, my former colleagues' eyes met mine as if searching for the truth. Sarah Harper and Emily stood behind me, their hands tightly clasping mine. I was no longer the discarded employee. I was a witness to integrity. The confrontation unfolded swiftly. My attorney presented every piece of evidence in detail: the source of the transfers, the inflated costs, and even the family relationship between Anthony and Gregory. There was no way for them to refute it. The board quickly removed Anthony Clark from his position, and investigative authorities began criminal prosecution. Ethan Reed was immediately suspended for his complicity in masking the wrongdoing. The day I left the conference room, the afternoon sun painted Summit Solutions building in pink hues. A crowd of reporters stood silently taking notes. I lifted my chin and took a deep breath. This journey to reclaim justice not only restored my position and reputation, but also served as a warning to anyone who dared to trample on another person's value. Sarah Harper smiled, her eyes full of faith. Emily ran up and hugged me, tears welling in her eyes. A few weeks later, I received an offer to serve as a security advisor for a tech company in Dallas, Texas, where they would value my experience and dedication even more. But I didn't rush to decide. I knew I had rewritten the definition of loyalty and justice. The road ahead still held many challenges, but now I walked with confidence that when someone knows their own worth, no one can bury them forever. The sun set, but the flame of justice burned brightly in my heart. The evening before the board meeting, Michael poured his dinner into a bowl and then stood by the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood where he and his family had built every brick, every home, together. The night felt quieter than ever, yet inside him, everything buzzed with anticipation. The board meeting was the next morning, the quarterly financial report would be presented, and the scheduled bonuses would be approved. Everything was perfectly timed for Michael to land the final blow. On Wednesday morning, he parked across the street from Summit Solutions headquarters in downtown Cleveland. The glass skyscrapers reflected the early sunlight, and people bustled through the revolving doors without a clue of the dreams and pain he had bottled up for months. In the passenger seat, Michael's laptop sat open, logged into a secret email account he had created years ago for security testing, a fake account with an internal domain address that was never tied to the official system. At 9:15 a.m., he adjusted his sleeve, took a deep breath, and hit send. The email's subject line read, "Urgent financial review required." The body summarized the anomalies around the payments to Apex Solutions Group, enough to be convincing and pique curiosity, but did not mention Anthony Clark's family ties. If Daniel were involved, he would panic. If not, he'd be forced to initiate an investigation. Either way, Michael would gauge their reaction. At 9:45 a.m., his phone buzzed. Ethan Reed's number appeared on the screen. Michael stared for a few seconds before letting it ring until voicemail. The message played. "Michael, we need to talk right away about your email. Call back immediately." Michael pressed his lips together, didn't reply, and drove to a nearby coffee shop. He chose a secluded corner, sat down, opened his laptop, and waited. At 10:30 a.m., another email flooded his inbox, this time from Laura Mitchell, the head of human resources. "Mr. Harper, We have received troubling communication from you that may violate your post-employment agreement. Please cease all contact with Summit Solutions staff immediately, and remember that you are still bound by confidentiality obligations. Any further contact will result in legal action. Michael raised an eyebrow. They were clearly playing games, intimidating, ignoring, isolating him. Last night he hadn't signed any binding confidentiality agreement. At 12 noon, he drove to the bank and opened his safe deposit box. Inside remained an old USB drive containing critical documents he hadn't disclosed earlier. They included the original security protocol he personally constructed, detailing exactly who had access to which systems and when each change was made. It was precisely 18 months ago that Anthony Clark had requested expanded control over the financial approval system, coinciding with when the covert payments began. Back at home, Michael saw 3 missed calls: Daniel, Vanessa, and now Tyler Brooks. He curled his lips into a bitter smile. Quick on the draw, Tyler Brooks, the well-dressed consultant, must have been eager to learn what was happening. Meanwhile, a critical email from Justin Cole, the young engineer he had once mentored, appeared. Michael, they say you sent an email exposing fraud. Brooks has called an emergency meeting. Everyone's talking. They've revoked all your access, including data history. Do you know what to do? Michael typed a terse reply. Do not interfere, Justin Cole. Just watch. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the landline at his house rang, a number he hadn't used for work in years. He picked up the phone and remained silent. On the other end, Anthony Clark's calm voice came through. Michael, we should talk about what you just reported. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Michael replied tersely, What do you call that? I'm simply stating the facts. Anthony hesitated. This transition period is always complicated. If you have questions about finances, there's the board of directors. Michael let out a dry laugh. Why would the board concern itself with internal operational matters? Best we meet tomorrow morning, just the 2 of us, to clarify everything. Anthony inhaled sharply. You're making a big mistake. Michael remained composed. No, you're the one who's afraid. Because I trust the board will want to investigate Apex Solutions Group and your brother-in-law. Anthony's voice faltered before ending the call. We can resolve this amicably. Generous compensation, a letter of recommendation, anything you need. Michael hung up. Goodbye, Anthony. No more than 10 minutes later, Vanessa sent another email. Dear Mr. Harper, we have revised your severance package. The amount has been doubled. This comes with an absolute confidentiality agreement regarding all company matters. He skimmed it, closed his laptop, and his eyes gleamed with steely resolve. They thought a binding confidentiality agreement would break his will, but what they didn't know was that Michael had painstakingly planned to ensure every piece of evidence would be made public in an incontrovertible way. All of Wednesday evening, he sat at his computer, organizing files and drafting an email to the board of directors. This time, it wasn't a vague accusation. It contained detailed proof: the payment ledger for Apex Solutions Group, the unjustifiable markup percentages, and the familial link between Anthony and the company's owner. He attached a copy of Apex's business registration, along with system logs showing that Anthony had explicitly requested elevated access. Everything was encrypted and sent through a secure tunnel, incapable of being deleted or altered. At dawn on Thursday, Michael strode into Summit Solutions' building. The board had convened another emergency meeting, and this time the chairman wanted to meet face-to-face. In the glossy conference room, the same stoic faces from before were now hesitant, their expressions a mix of surprise and disappointment. Daniel, Jason, and especially Anthony Clark. Anthony looked pale when Michael entered. He stood in the center of the room, posture slightly reserved, but eyes unwavering. The chairman tapped lightly on the table. What would you like to say, Michael? Michael opened a PDF on the large screen. The first slide read, in crisp black text on a white background, Summit Solutions Finances, Evidence of Fraud. No lengthy preamble was needed. Every figure and document appeared clearly. A 17% markup here, 19% there, on each invoice. No matter how hard Anthony tried to justify, he couldn't dispute it when his brother-in-law's name appeared in Apex's business filings. The board demanded that Anthony and Daniel account for themselves. They both hung their heads, unable to meet the director's gazes. Several senior members murmured, "How did it come to this?" A few shareholders even shouted, "We demand transparency!" The tension stretched until the chairman brought down his gavel. Anthony Clark is hereby removed from his position and handed over to the authorities for investigation. Ethan Reed will be immediately suspended pending further inquiry into his involvement. Michael left the conference room, walking past the line of photographers snapping pictures. His steps were steady. Sarah Harper and Emily waited outside, their expressions a blend of joy and pride. Emily ran into his arms, tears welling in her eyes. Michael pressed his face into her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent, a warmth amid the storm. At last, Michael needed no agreement or contract to enforce silence. He had compelled the corporation to acknowledge its wrongdoing, restoring justice for himself and the honest employees. 1 week later, his name appeared in the press, the unsung hero of Summit Solutions. But he didn't seek fame, he only wanted to deliver justice, so that future generations would know that with evidence, no one can bury the truth. On a peaceful afternoon in Cleveland, Ohio, he drove home with his family. Soft golden sunlight filtered through the green canopy over their house. Michael smiled, recognizing that every challenge had forged him into a more resilient and powerful person. The road ahead was still long, but now he walked with the firm belief that honesty and perseverance would always prevail. Thursday morning sunlight slanted through the window as Michael awoke with his heart pounding. He hadn't slept soundly last night, poring over thousands of lines of data and uncovering connections he'd once thought he'd overlooked. They were in disarray, yet they still believed this was merely a straightforward extortion attempt. In truth, they had no idea what awaited them. Michael recalled the moment 3 years earlier when Anthony Clark had first been appointed CFO. He'd uncovered a series of questionable consulting fees billed to Lakeside Business Solutions, a no-name company with no website and only a virtual office in Akron. Each invoice had been inflated by up to 20%, even though the service was either only partially performed or not performed at all. What shocked him most was that Lakeside's owner turned out to be Hannah Clark, Anthony's wife, whose CEO title had never once been disclosed by Summit Solutions. As Michael delved deeper into the old email archives, he realized that Ethan Reed wasn't just aware of those shady transactions, he'd actively facilitated them. Daniel had allocated extra budget to his IT team while forcing other departments to make cuts. That extra money was essentially payment for keeping the secret. Even Tyler Brooks wasn't exempt. Brooks's consulting firm had been awarded contracts through a special process that bypassed all standard vetting. Jason's real mission wasn't modernizing the system. It was clearing a path so that no one would discover the financial irregularities. And first and foremost, pushing Michael out of the loop. Their scheme was deceptively simple yet sophisticated. Create seemingly legitimate vendors, approve inflated invoices, then split the excess, because the actual services were still provided, albeit at marked up rates. Auditors seeing fully legitimate invoices would easily overlook the 15 to 20% discrepancy. Over roughly 2 years, about $4.5 million had been siphoned from Summit Solutions. By mid-morning, Michael sat at his computer, compiling everything into a comprehensive report. The spreadsheets illustrated the gradual cost escalations, supported by attachments of business registrations tied to the Clark family, and a thread of emails clearly showing Daniel's involvement. But what he did next truly caught them off guard. Michael reached out to Michael Nguyen, a board member he had collaborated with when implementing a cybersecurity project in Indianapolis. Michael Nguyen had largely faded into private life, but still attended quarterly meetings. "Hello, Michael, it's David Harper," Michael said over the phone. "Long time no speak. I heard you left Summit Solutions involuntarily." Michael Nguyen chuckled. "You're not there anymore, are you? What happened?" Michael Harper replied, "I need 15 minutes of your time. It's very important." There was a pause. Then Michael Harper asked, "This has something to do with Anthony and Daniel's recent tensions, right?" Michael Nguyen said, "Exactly." 1 hour later, they sat face to face in a park near Summit Solutions' Cleveland headquarters. A gentle breeze blew, but it couldn't dissipate the tension. Michael Harper handed Michael Wynn a sealed envelope and a USB drive. "Here it is," he said, "dates, figures, and family ties." Michael Wynn stared at him, then slowly nodded. "I always knew you knew what you were doing. Tomorrow there's an emergency finance committee meeting. Coincidence, huh, Michael?" As Michael Harper walked back to his car, his phone rang. "Missed call from Sarah Harper. A man named Tyler Brooks came by the house asking for you. He said it was urgent." Michael Harper offered a sly smile. "They're desperate now." That afternoon, 2 competing firms extended tempting offers, each with a higher title and a generous starting bonus. But Michael Harper didn't care. This was not the time to find a new job. His sole objective was to bring the truth to light. That night, Michael Harper sat at his keyboard for the last time, using his old employee credentials to access the company email servers, given how lax the transfer process had been. He scheduled emails to every board member for 8 o'clock the next morning. Each email would include his comprehensive report, immutable, and accompanied by all supporting documents. The moment of reckoning was near. As darkness settled, Michael Harper told himself, "Everything will be all right. They won't be able to escape the truth." He remained calm, though inside his emotions roared like a farmer sowing seeds in spring, waiting for harvest day. Ahead lay only a promising path where justice would prevail, and Michael Harper would officially become the one who planted the seeds of truth to expose every fraud. Friday morning dawned with a clear sky and soft sunlight streaming through the window. Michael Harper sat on his porch, sipping hot coffee and gazing at the peaceful neighborhood where his family had built their home. No urgent alarm rang, no need to head to the office, only the thrilling anticipation of what was to come. Precisely at 8 o'clock, his crucial emails were automatically delivered to every board member. This wasn't a trivial accusation. It was a complete dossier of every piece of evidence he had painstakingly gathered. Within minutes, Michael Harper's phone began to buzz incessantly with calls from unknown numbers, assistants to board members, frantically trying to reach him. He allowed all calls to go to voicemail, maintaining his silence as he awaited the next move. 9 o'clock marked the start of the Emergency Finance Committee meeting. In the conference room at Summit Solutions Cleveland headquarters, Michael Wynn appeared carrying a thick stack of documents, his face showing clear shock. When the projector screen flickered to life with the title Summit Solutions Financial Fraud Report, every member in the room was stunned. For the first time, the cold gazes of Ethan Reed and Tyler Brooks wavered, and Anthony Clerk's face crumpled, sweat beading on his brow. About half an hour later, Justin Cole's text arrived. "The police are here. Michael Cox and Daniel are being questioned in a separate room. Brooks looks ill. What have you done?" Michael did not respond. He felt calm inside, knowing that every investigative step had unfolded exactly as planned. The gears of justice were now in motion. By 10 o'clock, his phone rang with an even more unexpected caller ID. Laura Graves, Summit Solutions in-house counsel. Her tone remained measured. "Mr. Harper, we need you to come to the office immediately to clarify the information you sent to the board." Michael replied evenly, "I can discuss this over the phone." After a brief pause, Graves said, "No, this matter requires a face-to-face meeting. We want to ensure you understand the gravity of the situation." He smiled to himself. "Everything I know is in the report. If anything happens to me or my family, copies have already been sent to the SEC, IRS, and 3 major news outlets." Silence hung on the line, signaling her surprise. Then Graves exhaled softly. "The board is taking this very seriously. Several executives have been suspended pending the investigation. We appreciate your cooperation." Michael nodded slightly. "I have provided all necessary documentation. My part is done." That afternoon, Michael left home and drove to Frank's Diner on Cleveland's outskirts, about a 20-minute drive from headquarters. He didn't want to appear too conspicuous or be followed. While eating lunch, he tracked local business news. Summit Solutions. Board investigates financial fraud. No specific names had appeared yet, but that was only a matter of time. Later that afternoon, his phone rang again. Michael Nguyen's face appeared on the screen, looking tense. "This battle has turned into a bloodbath," Anthony confessed as soon as we laid out the evidence. He tried negotiating, blaming Daniel, but Daniel vehemently denied everything. Tyler Brooks claimed he was just a consultant and knew nothing about finances, but the board didn't buy it. All three of them have been suspended. Forensic audit experts will begin next week. The estimated amount siphoned is $4.5 million. Maybe more. Michael closed his eyes briefly and offered a slight smile. He was almost at the finish line. Michael Nguyen continued, "The board wants to offer you a new opportunity, not just your old position, but they want you as Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to the board. They need someone with your vision and experience." Michael was taken aback for a moment, but quickly composed himself. "I will consider it." He tapped the screen lightly. "There, you see? The outcome exceeded expectations." That evening, Michael returned home and recounted every development to Sarah Harper. She listened without interrupting, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. When he finished, she asked, "What do you want to do next?" The question caught Michael in his throat. Although it seemed he had reached his destination, should he return to Summit Solutions after 17 years of betrayal? The memories of those bitter yet dedicated years pressed on him. "I need time," he answered in a subdued tone. Sarah Harper nodded, her eyes gentle. "We'll think it over together." Around midnight, once the family was asleep, Michael opened his computer one last time. He posted a brief status update on his LinkedIn page. The first sign of activity in months. Let them collapse under the weight of their own greed. The words served as a signal to the world. Power can temporarily conceal the truth, but ultimately honesty prevails. Under the dim yellow light, Michael closed his eyes and envisioned the future ahead. He knew the new path would not be easy, but at least he had shown the corrupt a lesson they deserved. Whether he returned to Summit Solutions or sought new challenges, he would always carry pride in his resilience and uncompromising pursuit of justice. Monday morning arrived, and at 8 o'clock, David Harper entered Titanium Systems' lobby in a sharp black suit, an outfit he hadn't worn in years. The security guard looked at him and quietly nodded, handing over a pre-printed visitor badge that read David Harper. The silence in the high-rise lobby grew heavy. Many now knew that the ordinary systems engineer was the man who had forced 3 senior executives into the hot seat over a financial scandal. The elevator carried him to the executive floor. No curious stares followed, only looks of admiration and intrigue from former colleagues. They whispered among themselves about his return with newfound authority. Along the hallway, photos of Michael's past successful projects were displayed like historical markers. He paused before the meeting room door, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. 10 board members were already seated around the glossy oak conference table. Michael Nguyen, the one who had always placed his trust in David, gave a slight nod as Harper arrived. Seated at the head of the table was the acting chair, Hannah Parker, formerly the COO of Titanium, who cast a heavy, wavering smile at Harper. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The situation you exposed is unprecedented." Michael simply nodded, his gaze drifting to the documents on the table. Hannah continued, "Our audit results show that actual losses exceed $5 million. We are preparing for criminal proceedings." She paused and looked at Michael, waiting for his response. He remained silent, his heart calm but his mind racing with memories of sleepless nights and personal sacrifices to safeguard company data, sacrifices that were now being rewarded. Michael Nguyen spoke up. "Michael, the board has unanimously decided to create a new position, Chief Information Security Officer, CISO. This role will have full authority to audit any department, veto any budgets related to financial technology, and report directly to the board." Michael set his thick portfolio on the table and opened it calmly. "Inside are my conditions," he said. "These are non-negotiable requirements." If Parker skimmed each page, her eyebrows knitting together at this unusual list of demands. "You're requesting full audit authority, budget approval rights, and independence from all other departments?" Michael nodded. "Yes, that $5 million embezzlement happened because no one was watching. Now, someone will." The air in the room grew tense. Finally, Miss Parker sighed. We will review this. Michael cut in, I need your decision by noon today. I have other offers. He turned to leave, but as he reached the doorway, Miss Parker asked, You planned this all along, Michael? He stopped mid-step, his eyes drifting out the window. I never expected to be fired after 17 years of dedicated service, he replied slowly. Afterward, I simply did what I've always done, find a vulnerability and build the proper security measure. Miss Parker nodded in understanding. I see. At exactly 11:47 a.m., Michael's phone buzzed. It was a call from the board's office. They had accepted all of his terms. The voice of the Human Resources Director came through briefly. Congratulations, Michael. We look forward to you accepting the new position. Michael merely smiled and said, I will make the necessary arrangements. The voice on the other end offered a few polite congratulations, but he had already hung up, picked up his suitcase and strode confidently down the hallway. 6 months later, Michael sat in his corner office on the top floor of Titanium Systems headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Cleveland's vibrant skyline. His desk was piled high with security reports, system upgrade proposals, and drafts of new auditing procedures. Anthony Clark, once a powerful CFO, had ultimately pleaded guilty and received a reduced sentence for cooperating with investigators. Ethan Reed was still fighting charges, insisting on his innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. Tyler Brooks had fled to Miami, but an extradition order had already been issued. Most of the embezzled funds had been recovered, enough to spare Titanium from severe financial loss. Michael's former team now trusted him implicitly. Justin Cole, the young analyst Michael had mentored when he first started, had been promoted to Director of Daily Operations. Justin still sent messages like, "Thank you for seeing my potential." Michael smiled, recalling Justin's early, uncertain days as a junior programmer. A soft knock on the door pulled Michael from his thoughts. Sarah Harper appeared, as graceful as when they first met. "Ready for lunch?" she asked, her eyes bright. Michael nodded, throwing on his jacket as he rose. When he passed by the IT department on his way out, every employee fell silent and watched him. Not out of fear, but out of deep respect. They all knew that if Michael had wanted to destroy the company, he could have done so long ago. Instead, he chose to save it. In the elevator descending to the ground floor, Sarah Harper squeezed his hand. "Are you happy?" she asked softly. Michael looked into his wife's face and thought for a long moment. In the days following his dismissal, his guiding force had been anger. But now that anger had dissolved. In its place was a profound sense of completion, like reaching the last page of a finished book. "I'm good," he said, offering a gentle smile. "How about you?" Sarah Harper nodded, a pleased smile forming on her lips. "I've always been proud of you." Stepping into the October sunshine, warmth settled on their skin. Michael walked alongside Sarah to La Pergola Ristorante at the corner of downtown Cleveland. His phone buzzed with a new message from Michael Gwynn. "The board has approved your security budget increase past 100%. Michael fell silent for a moment, then smiled inwardly. "No arguments, no questions," he told Sarah. "Just trust." Sarah looked over his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Michael slipped his phone into his pocket and replied quietly, "Just thinking about bridges." He paused, scanning the row of trees lining the street. Some will break under too much weight. Some, when properly reinforced, become stronger than ever. Sarah Harper smiled softly and squeezed his hand. Together, the two of them continued toward the restaurant, leaving behind an old era and stepping into a new chapter, filled with hope and justice.